Good day, everyone. So we will discuss about the Cajegas trucking services. So based on the requirements on the problem, so you are required to prepare the 8-column worksheet, balance sheet, income statement, statement of changes in owner's equity. So what is given to you is the trial balance. So take note that there is an additional information below. Hence, the trial balance is yet the unadjusted balance of your account titles. So let us now prepare the 8-column worksheet. So what you would do first is write the heading. So I have already started writing the heading. So first line is the name of the business. Do not forget the name of the document, so that is the worksheet. And lastly is the date. So for the year ended June 30, 20B as given in the problem. So on the first part, do not forget that is for the account titles. For the money columns, the first two columns is where you will write the trial balance. So this is the unadjusted trial balance as presented in the problem. Do not forget debit, credit words. Then for the next two columns would be for the adjustments. Then again, it's debit and credit. Next two columns would be for the income statement. Then under that is the words debit and credit. And for the last two columns, it is for the balance sheet. Then the words debit and credit. So after making the proper headings, this is now the time that you will transfer what you have from the trial balance presented in the problem to your worksheet. So write the account titles and the balances. Delivery truck, accumulated depreciation, delivery truck. So you must copy the exact words presented in the problem, especially if that is already a trial balance. So consistency is the key when you would use account titles. So some students, before they would make the worksheet, they would identify at the side, they would write the category of each account title. So from the problem, some would write which are the assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expense. But if you're already good in classifying, you don't need to write them already, because when you would make the worksheet, you could simply identify them immediately. So I'm still transferring the trial balance here to our worksheet. So again, you must be consistent. So if you have used salaries and wages instead of salaries expense, you must use that. If it was called as utilities expenses in the problem, so you must also use that. But in our case, that is only utilities expense. Next would be the amount. So let me move first the picture so that it will be easier. Then since we will use money columns in our worksheet, you no longer need to write the peso sign, the comma, and the period for the decimal point. But for discussion purposes, so that you could clearly see the amounts, I have used the period and the comma. But then again, in reality, there is none if you will use the columnar or the worksheet. Again, another common mistake for students when they would transfer the amounts, they have a tendency of mistakenly writing them or transferring them in the worksheet. Instead of having a balance of debit, they would write it on the credit and vice versa. Or sometimes, instead of writing it in the trial balance, they have a mistake in writing it in the next two columns. and this is credit. So after transferring, do not forget the labels, get the total, and you should have the same amount as that of your problem. So if it is balanced, that is now the time that you will mark it as double rule. So after making the trial balance, since we are given the additional information, so this is now the time wherein you have to prepare the necessary journal entries. So in this case, since the requirement did not ask you to have the posting, so what you could simply do is make the journal entries. And of course, your solution. You could not have journal entries without the solution. So I will show you the solution. Let's just solve them immediately first before transferring in the worksheet. We will make the journal entries as well. So even if it's not required here to make the journal entries, since you are required to make the adjustments, that is automatic that there will be journal entries and with its solution. Okay, so we will start with our adjusting entries. So the first one is about the provision for uncollectible account. So it is based on the outstanding receivable account. So which means we will look at the accounts receivable. So based on the problem, it was 120,000. So simply multiply the 2% for the provision. So 120,000 times 2% is equal to 2,400 pesos. So this will be the provision for your uncollectible account. So meaning that is the expense for your uncollectible accounts and the estimated uncollectible account. So how would you record that one in your book? So you must know the entry. So based on your worksheet, you have already seen that there is an existing estimated uncollectible account. So how much was being recorded already? So that was 1,200 pesos. So as you can see, that is already found in your worksheet. So the effect is that there will be an increase of your estimated uncollectible account because the amount that should prevail is 2,400, but you have already recorded an amount of 1,200, so you need to add 1,200 pesos for your estimated uncollectible accounts. So please don't forget to write the complete label and the double rule. So let's write our entries at the side. Be sure that you have followed the format. So these entries, adjusting entries, are to be written in your journal after the original journal entries. So when you would make the entry, your debit will be an expense, which is uncollectible expense. So you must be consistent. So what is found in your trial balance is estimated uncollectible account. So your account title should be uncollectible accounts. That is your debit. And your credit would be estimated uncollectible account. You need to add more because we have only recorded 1,200, but you have to make it into 2,400, so you have to add 1,200. So I have not yet written the folio because we don't have any chart of accounts. We don't know the page numbers. So this is the solution for number 1, and for your adjusting entry, you use the letter A. Next would be number 2. So in number 2, that is supplies. Let's move it on the other side so that all entries will be written on the right and the solution will be at the center. So in number 2, it talks about supplies actually on hand. So try to look at your worksheet. What is found in your worksheet? So you have unused supplies, 15,000. But what should prevail is how much? Take note that unused supplies is an asset. And when you talk about actually on hand, meaning that is the asset portion. So per record, you have already the amount of, how much was it? Per record, unused supplies, 15,000. But what should prevail or what should be the remaining amount is 5,000. So always try to look at your trial balance or the worksheet. So actual on hand or to be recorded is only 5,000. So meaning out of this, a part is already being used. So you may use the account title, used supplies, or simply supplies expense. So what should prevail in our ledger is 5,000. So meaning there is 10,000 that is being used, or you could simply use the account title, use supplies, or supplies expense. So the second entry, letter B. So how would you make the entry? So take note that what has been recorded is 15,000. What should prevail is 5,000. So we already know that part of it is an expense. So let's try to for a while kay murag ni hang. So technical difficulty for a while, class. So let me exit so that it will not hang. Okay, here. So what should be the entry? So before anything else, let me try to show you how this should be recorded in your ledger. So based on records, you have the unused supplies. So take note that these adjusting entries are to be posted. So originally, you have the amount of 15,000 in your asset. But what should be left based on the additional information is only 5,000. So what happened, or how will you change it from 15 to 5? So you will deduct 10,000. So what is this 10,000? That is the expense portion. So where will you write the 10,000? So you make another T account that is for your expense, use supplies, or simply supplies expense. So in this case, we use the account title used supplies to be consistent. Then that is a debit of 10,000. So let's make the entry. So be sure that it is nagtupong or in line with your previous journal entry. So, debit an expense that is used supplies for 10,000, and your credit is you deduct your asset unused supplies because what will prevail is 5,000, what was recorded is 15,000, so meaning we have to subtract 10,000. So I started in the credit so that you would see the effect that we have to deduct 10,000 from your supplies, your unused supplies, your asset portion, and that is to be transferred to your expense. Please don't forget to write the peso sign. Next would be number 3. So let's try to make the picture big. So unfortunately, I could not adjust it anymore. So let's just deal with the small picture. So that is, of the prepaid insurance, 6,200 has already expired. So look at your worksheet or your trial balance. So that is the prepaid insurance. That's number 3. So prepaid insurance per record, that is how much? So per record, that is 8,500. As stated in the adjusting entry or additional information, what would prevail? There is an expired portion, 6,200. Meaning, part of your insurance is an asset, part is an expense. So, how much is the remaining asset? So, you would know by deducting the two amounts. So, that is 2,300, which is the remaining asset portion, meaning there is a decrease of your prepaid insurance. So if you'll make the ledger, if you'll post this in the ledger, so prepaid insurance per record, that is how much? 8,500. So that is an asset that is on the debit side, while your expense, meaning the expired portion, that still has a debit normal balance, so that is 6,200. But take note that this 6,200 is taken from the 8,500. So meaning, so let's show the components of this 8,500. So take note, this was the prepaid insurance. So part of this is an asset, part of this is the expense, which is the expired portion. It is stated in the problem, expired is 6,200. So out of 8,500, your asset would be 2,300. meaning the remaining balance of your prepaid insurance should be 2,300. To make it 23 from your 8,500, we will deduct or write it on the credit side 6,200, which is found in your insurance expense. So let's make the entry. So as much as possible, it is tupong or in line with your other entries. So just imagine I'm using a journal, but always remember that adjusting entries are written in your general journal. So debit insurance expense, that is how much? So since we have not yet recorded the expense portion, it was stated that 6,200 is the expense. So we have to open an account, which is the insurance expense, and deduct that amount from your asset. So that is 6,200. So you may be confused with the heading that I have used a while ago. So take note, what would prevail is 2,300. So number 4 talks about, what is number 4? About the prepaid rent. 18,000 of the prepaid rental has expired. So how much was being recorded in our trial balance or worksheet? So prepaid rent was 30,000, out of which is expired. So that is 18,000. So this prepaid rent is divided into two, the asset portion and the expense portion. So you could write expense, or let's just use the expired portion. That will be 18,000, meaning the remaining asset is 12,000. So simply deduct. That is 12, or let us show it this way. The rent is divided into two, asset and the expense portion. That is 30,000. So expired portion is 18, meaning the remaining is 12. So you have different solutions that you could show, or you could show this all. So long as you understand the concept, that is the adjusting entry. So what is found in our book is 30,000. So meaning we have to decrease the asset to show the expense portion. So if in the ledger, how would you present it? So prepaid rent, it has a debit balance of 30,000. While our rent expense, due to the additional information, we must record an expense. That is 18. So meaning we have subtracted that one from your prepaid rent to get the 12,000. So let's make the entry. So that is letter D. So record the expense portion. So what amount should prevail for your expense? That is 18,000, since it was just discovered that a part has been expired. So what would remain from your asset is 12,000. But you will not use that amount because we have already recorded 30. So it must be seen through your ledger that 12 will be the remaining amount. So how to make it 12? You have to subtract from your asset
through crediting the asset by 18,000. So that you will not be confused, we will not use the term decrease of asset, although the effect is you have decreased it, but to avoid confusion, let's change the label so asset to be recorded, meaning that is the final amount of your asset. And lastly, the fifth additional information talks about depreciation. So since the amount is given, you don't need to present the solution because it is already given that your depreciation for this year is 105,000. So how to record a depreciation? Go for a while. So let's double check our rent expense. So there's 18,000. So I'm just showing to you the balances of the previous in number 4, just in case for those who forgot. So what should be reflected is 18,000, and the final balance of your prepaid rent is 12. So again, in number 5, no need to show any computation. It is already given. Take note that this is only the depreciation for that year, although you have a balance of accumulated depreciation that was for the previous years. So debit, depreciation expense, and credit, accumulated depreciation. So be sure that you have indicated what kind of asset. In most cases, depreciation expense are in general. It is in the accumulated depreciation that you would show the balances of each non-current asset except land, because land is the only asset that will not the only non-current asset that will not depreciate. In fact, it would appreciate magkadugay, magkamahal. So that is accumulated depreciation for delivery truck, that is 105,000. So that is for the adjusting entries. So always remember that these adjusting entries again are written in your journal. So that is usually done after your original journal entries. So you are using your general journal for that. So you may use after the original journal entry. So if you still have space below, you could write it there, or you could proceed to the next page. So whichever is convenient for you. So for example, how do you write the adjusting entries? For example, that this is the last entry for your original journal entry. So June 25, kaya ang ending month for the fiscal period is June 30. So June 25 is the last transaction. So you have here the debit, credit. Then don't forget to write the folio, the amounts. So again, it's just an example. So how do you write the adjusting entry? So just below it or the next page, you will always write the words adjusting entries. So those entries, of course, there are folio, but in this case, we don't have chart of account, so that's why I did not use any folio at all for our adjusting journal entries. So how to present or how to post these accounts. Take note that after every entry, may it be journal, adjusting, closing, and reversing, you will always prepare them in the journal, then after which you will prepare that in the ledger. So although I have already changed the balances here, so this is the old amounts pa, this is already 6.2. So just in case nga this is the correct amounts, I have not yet presented this is yet the unedited entry, diba? It is, I changed it already to 6,200. So let's just assume that this is a correct entry. So how do you present an adjusting journal entry? So for example, this is the original. Let us assume that it has happened on March 20, 2020. For example, it's in the first page, JE1. Write the amount of 85. So when you would prepare your adjusting journal entry, that was debit insurance expense. So we'll make another T account. For example, this is our ledger. So let us just assume that the page number is GL 10 or 15. So just an assumption. So based on your adjusting entry, so you debited insurance expense 2,300. Again, this is not the edited part. So if you made necessary corrections, of course, you will also change your entry in your journal and at the same time in your ledger. So for the folio, adjusting entries are made at the end of the accounting period. That's why it's dated June 30. So in the folio, you will write, some would use adjusting entries the whole word, but so to be uniform let us just simply use AJE, meaning adjusting journal entry, then the letter. So since this is letter C, so AJEC, let us assume that this is in the second page of your journal, then you write the amount. So that is the debit. So in the credit, write the date. That is 2020, June 30. Then for the particulars, you'll write AJE, letter C. Write the folio, assume that that is the second page, then write the amount. So that's how you present your posting of your adjusting journal entry. So take note that in the particulars, you will write AJE, then what letter that is. Then if that is a closing entry, instead of using AJE, so you will use CE. So reversing entry, that happens at the start of the beginning balance of the next accounting period. Some would use beginning balance or some would write reversing entry. So the date would be the first day of the next accounting period. So in this case, it is July. If that is a calendar period, if you could recall in the second chapter, so that would be calendar year, that is January 1. So again, closing entry, you'll use CE. Some would use RE for reversing entry, but it's not applicable because RE means retained earnings. So we'll just discuss that in the next topic after this. So that would be all. And thank you for the adjusting entries. So there is a correction with our solution a while ago, so I forgot to include this one. So take note that the expense portion is 6,200. So this is 6,200. So this is 6,200. And this is 6,200. Take note that that is the expense portion. So what will prevail is 2,300, this one. But since we have already recorded the asset and we have not yet recorded the expense, so this is not the decrease of asset, but this is the total portion of your asset. So to be recorded, meaning the total amount of your asset. So how will you reflect that one? By adding insurance expense and deducting from your prepaid insurance the amount that is to be given for your expense. So let us check. How about the next? So it has the same procedure with number 4. So that is all for the changes.
Okay, so here is our worksheet. So you look at again your solution that we have in the adjusting journal entries. So what you would do in your worksheet, so after the totals, you will write adjust, you could skip one space or simply pwedeng delete. So you will write adjusting entries. So for number 1, we have uncollectible accounts, or for letter A, we have uncollectible accounts for a debit, and there are credit is estimated uncollectible accounts. So technique in making the adjustments portion in our worksheet is that you must know what are the existing account titles that has a current balance. So meaning na ay balance daan. Because for those with current balance, all the adjustments would be presented in these parts. But for those account titles that are not yet being presented in the trial balance, you will write it below. Okay? So, like for example, uncollectible accounts. Look at your trial balance. Do we have that existing expense account? No. So, what you would do is, you will write uncollectible accounts. Then, don't be mistaken with the which column you will write. So be sure it's under adjustments. And since this is on the debit side, and do not forget, you will write what letter that is from your adjustments. So how much was that? 1,200. So basically, in your worksheet, you will write it on the same group of the money columns, but I separated it because I will just use formula in adding the amounts. I cannot add if I will write the letter here. So what I did is I make another column. So don't be confused. But basically in your worksheet, you will still write it under the debit money column. Next is for the credit is estimated uncollectible accounts. So I believe we have already that account title. So you will write that letter. Take note, it's on the credit side. So that's the first adjusting entry, letter A. So you will write 1,200. Next, adjusting entry. We have a debit of unused used supplies. So do we have used supplies? Or if you use supplies expense, you could use that. So there is none. So you write it below. Used supplies, that is letter B. That is for a total of 10,000. What is your credit? It is unused supply. So please don't be confused on which part you will write. So it must be on the credit side since in your adjusting journal entry, you made a credit. Next, insurance expense. So we don't have an existing insurance expense. So you will write insurance expense, that is letter C, for a total of 2,300. So what should be our credit? So prepaid insurance. So I believe we have an existing prepaid insurance. So again, it's credit. So that's letter C, for a total of 2,300. Next adjusting entry was the one about rent. So what was our debit? So rent expense. It was not yet found in our trial balance, so you write it below. So rent expense, that's letter D, a total of 18,000. So what should be your credit? It is prepaid rent. So take note, it's on the credit side, so be sure that you have written it on the credit portion of the adjustments columns. That is a total amount of 18,000. And lastly, depreciation expense. So we have not yet recorded any depreciation expense. So write it below. That is a total of 105,000. Wait, depreciation expense for the period. Okay. So ma'am, naaman lagi existing accumulated depreciation. Take note that this accumulated depreciation, this is made from the start of the business, from the time that you have purchased the asset until the current period. So from the name itself, accumulated depreciation, if your business has started for or has existed for 5 years, meaning this 250,000 is already good for 5 years. But depreciation expense is recorded at the end of each accounting period. So we have not yet recorded for the current year. For example, it's the 6th year. So meaning this depreciation expense, you don't need to consider your previous balance unless if it would state that the depreciation expense for this year was overstated. So that's the time that you will make the solution. Pareha itong ganiha, you compare the how much is recorded, how much is the expired portion, and how much should be recorded. So in this case, dili na mao. Why? Because this is the depreciation expense for this period. The accumulated depreciation is the depreciation recorded from the previous years. So you must understand that every time you will make a provision for depreciation that is done at the end of each year. And you will see the account title accumulated depreciation because that is from the start where you already had your business and your asset until the current period. So no need to compare 250,000, ma'am. So should I minus something to get to make it into 105? No, because that 250 is from the previous years. So meaning we have to add 105,000 for this period. So that is the total adjustments. So you have to make the totals again. So simply add. So since we don't have amounts here above on the debit side, so I just added the ones here. Well, this one, so I will add this 5. So that is the total adjustment. So still the same. It must be equal, both debits and credits. So since that is a total, do not forget the double rule. So supposedly, if this is a 10-column worksheet, we have the next 2 columns for the adjusted trial balance, meaning we must show the balances as to their adjustments. But in this case, wala. So meaning we still have to add or subtract, whatever the case, when we will transfer them in our income statement and balance sheet. So using the technique before, you must identify which of these are assets, liabilities, equity, income, or expense. So there's no problem if it's found in the trial balance because they are already arranged. So you must know asa lang mo end until which account title is the last part for the assets, which is the last part for the liabilities, equity, income, and expense. But for this, from your adjusting entries, it's a different scenario. Why? This is a combination of different accounts. It just so happened in our adjusting entries here, this is not in all cases. Uh, it's a coincidence that all of these account titles are expense accounts. Sometimes, especially if there would be accrued income, accrued expense, so what are those accruals? You have not yet recorded them. So what would happen is, under the adjusting entries, it's a combination. There could be an asset, there could be a liability, there could be an equity, income, or expense. So it depends. Anyway, so let's continue. So cash in bank, that is a balance sheet. So in the trial balance, that is 1,020,000, but there are no balances or there are no adjusting entries pertaining to cash in bank. So you will simply transfer that amount from your trial balance to the balance sheet. And again, please don't be careless on which part would you transfer. So that should be on the debit side of your balance sheet. So that is 1,020,000. How about petty cash fund? Were there any adjustments? There's none. So that's 1,000. How about accounts receivable? Were there any adjustments? There's none. That is an asset, so that is in the balance sheet. How about estimated uncollectible account? So we have here, so let me highlight so that you can see. So we have on our trial balance, there was a credit balance of 1,200, while we also made an adjustment on the credit side, meaning we have increased the balance by 1,200. So the total amount is already 2,400. You simply add. How about unused supplies? So I will highlight those that have adjustments kasa. Although this is not a necessary part of your solution, so for discussion purpose, let me just highlight them. So unused supplies, original balance was 15,000, but you were informed that a certain portion is the remaining assets on hand. So there was a deduction for the expense portion. Now, take note, this was on the debit, this is on the credit, so what you would do is subtract. So whichever amount would prevail, whether it's on the debit or credit side, that is also where you would transfer. So the higher amount is on the debit side for 15,000 less the credit of 10,000, so the remaining balance is a debit of 5,000. Prepaid insurance, so we also have an adjustment. So 8,500 debit side, we also have a credit, meaning we have to subtract. So 85 minus 23 is how much? 6,200. So which is higher? Is it debit or credit? It's debit, so transfer that to the debit side. How about your prepaid rent? So we have adjustments. So the debit is 30,000 and we had credit of 18,000. So 12,000 is the difference and it is on the debit side for 12,000. Delivery truck. So there are no changes. So you'll simply copy. Again, that is on the debit. So be sure that you have transferred it on the debit side. How about accumulated depreciation? So you have recorded 250,000 credit and you will add because we had a credit of 105,000, so that is a total of 355,000. Accounts payable, so yes, it's still in the balance sheet. That is a liability. Take note that it is on the credit side, So when you would transfer it, write it on the credit side. How about capital? So that's still part of the equity section, balance sheet. So transfer it. How about drawing? Still balance sheet. That is the contra account of your capital. So here, tracking income. That is already in the income statement. Take note, it is on the credit side. So where is the income statement credit? It's here. So 935,000 credit side. How about taxes and licenses? There are no changes. That is an expense, so debit side. Repairs and maintenance, simply copy under the debit side of your income statement. Retainer fee, same, copy. Salaries and wages, copy. Also with your utilities expense. So let's proceed with your, this is 8,200 only. So let us proceed with your adjusting entries. So there's no problem because all of these are expenses. No need to further confuse yourselves whether what are these account titles. So income statement na sila because those are expenses and they are on the debit side. So you will simply copy. So your favorite part is the simply adding of the balances. So add those found on the debit side of your income statement. Add also those on the credit side of your income statement. I believe there's only one amount. Also with your balance sheet. Ma'am, it's not balanced. Again, expect that it will not yet be balanced because you have to know what is the result of the operations of your business. So know the difference. So subtract. How about in your balance sheet? So it must be the same difference. If you have noticed, I made a solution here. So no need to write the difference in your worksheet because you will write it below the totals. You will indicate whether that is profit or loss. So I just showed here upilay difference. So the difference between the debit and credit of your income statement is 408,300, same as with your balance sheet, which means there is mga 88% more or less, provided your balances here are correct. So meaning wala ka na sayop og add og 0 or minus og 0. So let's go to the what do you call this? The analysis part. So how would you know whether that's a profit or loss? In profit, the income must be higher than the expense. So how would you know where is the income? That is the credit side. You could look at it here. What is higher here? It's credit, which is, when you would look at the account title, it's income. Lower ang expense, meaning this is a profit or that is not income. So you could simply write profit. So how much is the difference? 408,300. So let's go back to the part on what is the effect of profit in the balance sheet. So that could increase your capital. Normal balance of your capital is credit. So you will add it on the credit side. How about in your income statement? So you have credited that one in your balance sheet. So you have to debit that one in your income statement. Opposite. So if there is a debit, there is also a credit. So that is the only analysis part of the worksheet. Except sa pag-classify sa account titles, which is, it's not more on an analysis so long as you understand the account titles. So this is now what you call the grand totals, meaning the final totals. So you will add them. So they must be balanced. So now let us make the financial statements. So, as what I have discussed last meeting, it would be better if we will start with, sa mag-start, ni income statement. So, let me prepare first formatting. Okay, so income statement. So, what was the name of the business? Cajegas? Cajegas Trucking Services. So, Cajegas Trucking Services. Next is the name of the financial statement. So, that is income statement. Then, the accounting period for the, what was in the, for the year ended. Meaning, that is fiscal year. Ma'am, di mo na year because it's not December. If you could recall, our previous topic, I think that was, what chapter was that? Second or third chapter. So we have different kinds of accounting periods. We have the fiscal year and the calendar year. Calendar year is where it ends with December, while fiscal year, it starts and ends with any other month except, if you start, except January, except if it's ending, except December 31. Anyway, so let's start. So this is the revenue. So what was our revenue? So our revenue here is trucking income. So how much was it? So let's zoom this. Trucking income is 935,000. Since there is only one revenue, no need to write total revenue. I could simply write less expenses since this is service concern. So only expenses, there's no cost. So copy all the expenses. So from here, taxes and licenses. Repairs and maintenance. So basically, through the worksheet, you have actually made your financial statements. What you would do, what we are doing currently now is making it a formal financial statement, but you could already see it in the worksheet. Retainer fees. Was it retainer fees or retainers? Or retainer fees. So again, you must be consistent with the account title. Next is salaries and wages. Then utilities expense. Next would be uncollectible accounts. Then used supplies. What's next? Insurance, rent, depreciation. Insurance, rent, and depreciation expense. Then you will write the amounts. So you will look at here. 10, 27, 25. 10, 27, was it 25? 35. 25. 320, 82. 320, 8,200. Then uncollectible accounts, 1, 2, 10, 2, 3. 1, 1, 2, 10, 2, 3. Rent expense, 18 and 105. 18 and 105. So before I wrote the total expenses here, sometimes you could also do it like this, total expenses, then you could simply write it here. Then you just simply add them, and that should be your expenses. So to double check, you could look at your worksheet. So 5 to 6, 700, and 935. So it is shown here. This is the debit, and this is the credit. So as you have seen, I did not write the words debit and credit here because it's not that way. It just so happened that when you list amounts here, it is better if you will write it in a separate column. But some businesses, especially if you have different or you have limited space, you could simply write them in one column. But this is the most convenient way. So this is net income because let's use capital for the final amounts. Why is it net income? Because revenue is higher than your expense. So revenue less, that is your income statement. So next requirement, supposedly it was the balance sheet. Then again, I already told you it would be better if you will start with income statement than the statement of changes in owner's equity, diba? That's what I've told you before. So this is the statement of changes in owner's equity. So let's start. What was the name of the capital? Here. P. Cajegas Capital. So P. Cajegas Capital. Do not forget to write the word beginning, or you could simply write big. But you could not write at the end as end. So it would be better if you write the whole word. So how much was it? 18,500. So add. If you have additional investments, but if wala, never mind. So since there is net income, so you will add net income. So net income was, you will look at your income statement, that is 408,300. You'll get the total. So peso sign because there will be a line here. So you will simply add. Then less. So what are the items that you will subtract it from that area? It's either net loss and it's either or both, net loss or drawing. But since we already had net income, so there is no net loss. So we'll simply write here drawing. So we have drawing in our trial balance, that is 50,000. Then this is now the time that you will get the final balance. Take note that that is subtract. Please don't be confused on when to add and when to subtract. So this is P. Cajegas Capital ending. Don't forget the peso sign. So if you are using the computer for your answers in the future, so don't forget to mark this bold. So nakadarken siya. But since this is accounting 1, sige, for the financial statements, for those who can, I will allow you to use the Microsoft Excel. But for those who cannot, so you will take a picture of your work. But only for the financial statements, ha. The worksheet, the journal, the ledger, you will still use those papers. So this is only for the income statement, balance sheet, and statement of changes in owner's equity. Sige, I could allow that. So let's go with the balance sheet. I could just write it below. So you already know how to use the account form, the most usual form is report form. So let's just use the report form. But you already know the account form, just in case. So balance sheet, so it's not for the year, but this is as of. So you need to separate the assets from the other account, the other categories. So this is assets. Then you have to write which one is the current. So look at our trial balance or the worksheet. So which are your current assets? So from cash in bank until prepaid rent. So total current assets. So for the amounts, so can I copy? So I want you to observe this one, the format. Since in this case, we already have estimated uncollectible accounts. So what you would do here is take note that this estimated uncollectible accounts is a related account, a contra account of your accounts receivable. So you will write it here because you have a separate computation. So 120,000, then estimated collectible account, that's 24. Then after that, you will make a line because you will subtract the net amount, meaning as accounts receivable less estimated uncollectible account, the answer of that will be placed here. So meaning this is the net realizable value of your accounts receivable. Because the meaning of estimated uncollectible account is the estimate of the accounts receivable that cannot be collected. Again, it's just an estimate. The next, until prepaid rent, is it here? Then you will get the total. So this will be your total current asset. Next, non-current. Since we have only one depreciable asset, you could simply write the amount on the final column. What do you mean, ma'am? So, you don't need to make this presentation, nga? You will write it here. If there are a lot of accounts of depreciable asset, so you will write it here, then less accumulated depreciation, then pinaingani. You will write the final balance here. Then another asset, less accumulated depreciation, you will write it here, then here. But since there's only one kind of asset, non-current asset, so you could simply write it at the last part. So how much was the amount? 1, 5, and 355. 1, 5, and 355. So this will be the total non-current assets. So this is not add, again, it is less. Then this is now the time that you could make the total assets. So what will you add? So this one, so you'll make a line, and this one, you'll make a line, peso sign. So that is to be added. So that is your total asset. So do not forget to double rule. Next would be your liabilities. So how many is your liability? We only have one. So some would simply do it this way, either of the two. Current. So accounts payable. So some would no longer write total current. Some they would still write, but it would be better if dili na. So that is 130. Some they will not write total liability. So since there's only one, let's just use the word liability. So some, previously I wrote here total liability. Some they would no longer write. Basta if there is only one. So either. So this is owner's equity. So I'm giving you a different solution because some businesses would prefer having the word even if there's only one total liability or total liabilities. But if there's only one, sometimes the other businesses would immediately write it there. So long as you would indicate nga that is current or non-current. So what's the name of the P. Cajegas Capital? P. Cajegas Capital. No need to write it in bold. Cajegas Capital. So, the amount here should be the same amount in your statement of changes in owner's equity, 2,176,800. 2,176,800. Then, total liabilities and owner's equity. So, you will add this. So, it must be balanced. So, is it the same with your total assets? Is it? So it's balanced. So again, start with your income statement. The result of your income statement is used in your statement of changes in owner's equity. The result of that will be presented in your balance sheet. So that would be all for your Cajegas problem. So thank you and have a good day. So correction in the problem. So this is not 2,300, but this is supposedly 6,200. So there will be corrections because this is the expired portion. 2, 2, 3. So this is what I've said. So if you will make the necessary corrections, sumpay na siya. Be sure that you know what are the effects. So what is the difference? It is 4,400, 404,400, I mean. And this one is not 2, 3, but this is 6, 2. So net income is also changed. So what is the change amount here? This is 2, 3. Your capital is 2,172,900. So if you know the effects, 2,172,900. Then, if you know what part will be changed, you understand the effects, then you would know where to change. So that would be all for the changes, I think. So thank you.